I don't know what's happened to your rents, but I know what's happened to
Well, I think
mine.
over the last 5 years, I heard a figure the other day, I think it's about right. Over the last 5 years, rents have gone up 30% on average, and some have been more. That's probably about true for mine. Is that true for your portfolio, pretty much?
Yeah, I was saying in some of them more
Yeah.
than
Now,
that.
some of them, I've got long-term tenants and I've not put the rent up that much. I like to keep tenants in, and landlords generally, we don't increase rents as much as we could. And sometimes people think, always putting rents up. The vast majority of landlords are probably not going up with inflation, and maybe have not gone up. And only when a tenant maybe moves out, and then we readjust the rent up to the market rent. And some landlords don't even do that, by the way. So, but yeah, I think, unfortunately, if you do something that's going to cause less people to be landlords, there will be a less supply, and just basic economics means that prices are going to go up, and unfortunately the landlords lose out. And with the renters' rights bill, where they're abolishing section 21, that's the no fault eviction, so we can give notice and just get someone out, even if they're a good tenant paying, we can get rid of someone.
I think it's interesting. I'm sorry to talk over you there, but
No,
there's some
it's good.
really good reasons why we might need that to happen.
Exactly.
We might have to sell a property to, for whatever reason,
Yeah,
we might
we
have
might have
to.
to sell a property to pay the huge tax bill we now have because of section 24.
Absolutely. We might be, streamlining our portfolio or whatever. Could be very
Exactly.
good reasons for that to happen.
Yeah.
And that's a real threat. And that's going to put off a lot of people from moving
Yes.
into this space, I think.
And what that means now, again, thinking about the tenants are going to suffer if it's going to be, now, by the way, we can still get rid of tenants. There's going to be Section 8, some new grounds. If someone's not paying the rent, yes, we can get them out. Might take a bit longer, and there's a challenge with the courts being overwhelmed. They really need to reform the court system. But if you think about it, go back a step. If a landlord is generally going to find it harder to get rid of bad tenants, don't you think they're going to be far more vigilant about who they put in as tenants? And obviously there are things we can get, like we can get rental insurance. So in other words, if a tenant does default, doesn't pay, as long as they've passed all the credit checks and referencing, we can pay £400 for the year maybe, and then if there's a problem, actually the insurance will cover that. So there are things we can do, but it's all extra expense we have to take on. I even heard about, there's a website I think called Rent Guarantor, where a tenant, if they don't have a guarantor, can pay a certain amount, and they will again insure it and guarantor that rent if they pass certain checks. So there are things we can do, but if we can be more vigilant, I worry about the slightly more vulnerable tenants, maybe tenants who don't have such a good track record, they're not very good with money. They're going to find it even harder to find accommodation, because of course, why wouldn't we pick the best tenant we can for our property? And that's going to put even more pressure on councils to provide emergency accommodation, and it's going to cost the government, the councils, more money anyway. So a lot of these things which are designed to help and protect tenants, I think actually that they're policies put in place by people who unfortunately don't really understand property.
Yeah. And I house a number of probably fairly vulnerable tenants, and people
Same
that
here.
would struggle to certainly go into a letting agent, a mainstream letting agent, and rent a property. I've had people move in without paying a deposit. I've had
Same
done all
here.
sorts of things over the years to kind of enable people to move in, because I think they've been a good longer term bet.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Anne. We as private landlords can have that flexibility and that choice to do that. We want to give people a bit of a help sometimes. And, sometimes I've helped people out and it's been a mistake. They've taken a bit of advantage. Sometimes I've helped people out and they've been amazing tenants, and that is their home, and they're going to stay there forever, right? But imagine all of the UK housing is run by institutions, pension companies, BlackRock, these kind of companies. Do you think that the tenants are going to get that kind of flexibility and that kind of approach that we can use as private individuals? There's no way that's going to happen. If it doesn't tick the box, there's no way. So this is going to cause a massive housing problem, even worse than one we have in the UK right now.
And there are other threats as well, aren't there? We're talking about the changes to the EPC ratings, where, we're going to have to improve those on our properties. And for a lot of those, they might be older stock. I've got a lot of kind of Victorian terrace properties.
Yeah.
And,
some houses like that, you're never going to get it up to a C no matter what you do.
No. And so what? So what's going to happen with those properties? I don't quite get it either. So it's not good enough for a tenant to move into with that EPC rating. So I'll have to sell it, and then someone else can buy it and live in it, but it's fine for them.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And I guess
I don't really get it.
And also it's interesting where, especially, so some properties you're not going to be able to go. I've got some listed properties where I can't make the necessary changes. So they're kind of exempt from that. But the EPC, the idea was to give the tenant an idea of how much of the bill is going to be, how energy efficient is the property, which when you think about it, if it's an HMO or service accommodation where, well, particularly HMOs where the tenants are not really paying the bills, does it really matter if it's not a C? Because we're the ones paying for it. So you kind of, some of it again is missed, that the policy doesn't really match up with the reality of how things actually work.
Learn from people who've been there and done it. Real investors, real lessons. ypn.plus.